Hey, what's happening guys, Chris here, going over another one of those guns in Battlefield 1's In the Name of the Tsar DLC. And today's video is going to be all about the Parabellum MG14-17, a support machine gun capable of ripping through targets like they're made of wet paper. The Parabellum MG14-17 was a slightly updated version of the MG14 that came before it, which was actually a complete redesign of the MG08 machine gun which came before that. It was a very different weapon to the MG08 and was much more geared up for aircraft use, firing its 8mm Mauser rounds at the rapid rate of 700 RPM, fed from an enclosed belt within a drum capable of holding up to 250 of these cartridges at any given time. And this allowed the weapon to deliver huge volumes of fire and pepper enemy planes in a deadly shower of metal. To counter the heat buildup generated by this intense fire rate, the MG14 was fitted with specific barrel jackets depending on what kind of aircraft it was used on. Units mounted on Zeppelins often had water-cooled jackets surrounding the barrel, as this would have reduced the chance of it being a fire hazard, something which could have been a pretty big problem for a giant floating tube of fabric. Other versions, including the MG14-17, were kitted out with perforated air-cooled barrel jackets instead, which would simply just use the cold air up at those higher altitudes to reduce that heat, and these would have been mounted onto lighter airplanes and used by observers. The specific MG14-17 version had a number of small improvements to the MG14's design, including a thinner air cooling jacket around the barrel, along with the addition of a mounting rail for telescopic optical sights, and the MG14-17 would have also been primarily used in the air, just like the original model. So with requirements for German aircraft machine guns being formulated in around about 1909, this attracted private companies to set out work on creating suitable weapons for aerial combat. And so DWM, the same company which manufactured the Luger pistol, tasked automatic weaponry expert Karl Heinemann to design an effective gun which could be mounted onto aircraft. In the year of 1914, the Parabellum MG14 was created and adopted as a self-defense weapon for airships and planes. Though just about a year later, in the summer of 1915, Dutch aviation pioneer Anton Fokker was developing synchronization gear to use on his planes, which basically allowed pilots to fire forwards between their aircraft's propeller blades at a target in front of them. The MG14 seemed like an ideal candidate to conduct a few tests on with some pre-production prototype planes, using the gun synchronizer. And well, let's just say that you wouldn't have wanted to be up in the air with an MG14 stuck on the end of your aircraft's snout, as the weapon jammed quite a lot, and sometimes decided to lose sync with its propeller blades, blasting them into pieces, which wouldn't have exactly been very fun thousands of feet up in the air. Because of these reliability issues, along with the fact that the gun was in fairly limited supply, it was decided that the MG14 should be reserved for aircraft which didn't utilise the synchronization gear, and used on flexible mounts by observers in reconnaissance planes, along with defensive gunners on Zeppelins, which could both benefit from the weapon's lightweight and speedy rate of fire. A few years later, in 1917, the gun was slightly modified, and the MG14-17 model was made, with the intention of it being fitted onto planes too. Though near the end of the war, there was a bit more of a demand for LMG-type weapons on the ground, and although the MG14 machine guns weren't really designed for infantry use, some units were issued to ground troops to fit the role of being a suppressive LMG. Just like most of the other weapons from the In the Name of the Tsar DLC, there's two variations of the Parabellum MG14-17 to unlock and use in online multiplayer. The first being the low weight variant, which requires you to destroy 2 airplanes with light machine guns and take out 20 enemies with the Mortar Airburst. So this one's not exactly the easiest one in the world to get your hands on, but with patience you should be able to unlock it eventually. Thankfully, the suppressive variant is a bit easier to acquire, as you'll just need to get 40 kills with the Lewis gun low weight, along with 50 vehicle repairs, which can be done fairly quickly by patching up damaged tanks out on the field. But anyway, moving over to the stats, the Parabellum MG14-17 has a very similar damage output to the Madsen and the MG15NA, as it's going to deal a maximum damage of 23 at those closer ranges, but from 11 meters, the gun's damage output is going to start to decline gradually, up to the range of 42.5 meters, where that damage is going to level out at the minimum damage output of 17.5. This basically translates over to a 5 bullet kill under 30 meters and a 6 bullet kill beyond, which is the same as a lot of the other support LMGs already in the game, apart from the likes of the Hewitt, Lewis gun and Perino, which are all going to take one more round to put someone down beyond 38 meters, down to their bullets inflicting slightly less damage over longer ranges. I should point out that apart from the show, all of the LMGs are going to kill in the same amount of rounds up close, including the Parabellum MG14-17. And although the Parabellum's damage isn't massively different to most of the other support weapons, the Browning Rifle and B'nai M'Ree are still both going to offer a tiny bit more damage at longer ranges, which won't affect the number of bullets it takes to kill, but might mean that they'll be a bit more reliable for ensuring a target is going to go down, especially if they've already been weakened by someone else first. This also means that if you land a headshot with the Browning Rifle or B'nai M'Ree over longer ranges, then you can kill your target in one less bullet than the Parabellum. Though a headshot at closer ranges with the Parabellum will usually be enough to bump the damage up, high enough to kill in one less bullet too, giving you a slight advantage in the CQC battle. So the Parabellum's damage might not exactly be anything out of the ordinary, but the rate in which it can inflict that damage is pretty damn high, as the MG14-17 fires at a blistering speed of 700 RPM, making it now, up to the Russian DLC, the fastest firing support machine gun in Battlefield 1. This rapid fire rate is going to allow you to shred your enemies up in no time, dishing out an extremely high amount of damage in such a short space of time. In fact, with the gun shooting so quickly, it now has the best kill time over all ranges, apart from the show, which despite being on the completely opposite side of the speed scale, as the support class's slowest firing weapon, it can actually still kill a tiny bit quicker in a close quarter gunfight, but only by a fraction. Though outside CQC, the Parabellum's killing speed is unmatched, and it can pretty much beat all of the other LMGs, along with most of the other weapons in the game for the other classes too. Though it's worth pointing out that the MG14-17 won't be able to suppress fire all day long in one continuous stream, as it's going to start overheating after about 35 shots, where you'll need to wait a little bit for the gun to cool down. Along with having a lightning fast fire rate, the Parabellum is also gifted with the high muzzle velocity of 870 meters per second, matching up to the MG15NA. This is one of the highest velocities in the entire game, beating most of the scout rifles for bullet speed, which makes it very easy to hit moving targets in the distance without having to lead their movements much first. It also slightly decreases that time to kill in the process too, with your bullets reaching their destination faster, and so having a high muzzle velocity really benefits the weapon's effectiveness, making it a more viable weapon for longer range firefights. Being able to kill extremely quickly is one thing, but being able to stay on target is another matter. And it's going to be a very hard thing to do with the Parabellum MG14-17, as its recoil pattern is completely nuts. The gun's going to kick upwards at a value of 0.38 degrees, and side by 0.8, which is pretty terrible. The vertical recoil might not be as high as the Browning rifles or the shows, but it's only a tiny bit less, and so it's still got a fairly high value anyway. As for that horizontal recoil though, which is completely off the charts, to put things into perspective, the Parabellum's got over twice as much lateral recoil as the MG15NA, which used to be the least accurate weapon in the support's arsenal up until now. Combined with a higher than average first shot multiplier of 1.8 times, along with those very high spread values when moving for both ADS and hipfire, it's safe to say that the MG14-17 probably has the worst recoil pattern in the whole game. In those closer proximities, the Parabellum can still perform fairly well with it being able to kill very quickly. But just outside of these shorter to medium range gunfights, the weapon's going to be almost unusable, especially if you're on the move. Both variants of the MG14-17 are kitted out with that extremely useful bipod though, which is a godsend, as it allows it to be an effective gun over much longer distances, by greatly reducing that recoil and directly countering the main problem that the weapon has. You are going to be a sitting duck whilst in a stationary position, and despite utilising the bipod, you'll still have to contend with some of the weapon's recoil too, with it being so bloody high. You're not going to have laser beam precision, and you still might struggle to kill targets miles away in the distance, but that bipod is definitely the key to being able to fully utilise the full power of the weapon beyond those closer ranges. The suppressive variant is kitted out with a telescopic scope, which will probably make it easier to acquire and take down your targets over longer ranges with the bipod setup, though other than having a better view on your enemy, it doesn't really offer any statistical benefits over the low weight variant, which is going to recover faster from recoil and is also going to gain a bit more accuracy the longer it's fired, which might make it a slightly better option to pick for closer to medium range battles. With the Parabellum MG14 holding up to 100 rounds at a time, this gives you quite a lot of bullets to use before you'll need to reload, with the gun having one of the largest ammo capacities in the whole game. This high ammo count goes together really nicely with the weapon's speedy rate of fire, as because you'll be shooting your bullets out at a much quicker rate, you'll be losing your ammunition at a much quicker rate too. So having a big drum with tons of rounds ready to fire is going to be quite beneficial in allowing you to suppress the enemy and swiftly take out several targets one after the other without interruption. One of the biggest problems the Parabellum has to face, by utilising a belt with non-disintegrating links, is the fact that its reloads are going to be quite lengthy, as you're going to have to manually rewind your partially spent ammo belts, which makes for a fairly time-consuming tactical reload. Full reload is also going to take a pretty long time to perform, lasting 6.9 seconds, which is far greater than the other LMGs, though depending on how much ammo you have left on the gun's belt, also depends on how long your tactical reload is going to be too. Having 76 to 100 bullets left over in the weapon is going to cost you a 6-second reload, which despite being a fairly long reload time, is actually the shortest for the Parabellum. If you have under 25 rounds left over in the weapon's belt, then it's going to take a whopping 7.3 seconds to get that back to full, taking more time to perform than when reloading from empty. And when compared with other LMGs in the game, these reload times are very extensive. In comparison, the MG15 NA, which is one of the slowest reloading weapons for the support class, also has a 100 round ammo capacity, which is similar to the Parabellum. In fact, the MG15 NA Suppressive can actually hold up to 200 rounds, and all of its variants can perform both tactical and empty reloads at a much quicker rate than the Parabellum, which is going to put you in some very vulnerable positions when you're left high and dry with an empty drum. So, in conclusion, the Parabellum MG14 is a very angry gun. Although it doesn't have a very different damage output to the other support weapons, its rate of fire dramatically bumps up the gun's lethality, giving it one of the strongest kill times of the entire class. Of course, a weapon with such a high amount of stopping power has to take a hit elsewhere to make things nice and fair. And in the Parabellum's case, that extra speed is also going to cause the gun to bounce all over the place with an extremely erratic recoil pattern. In close quarters, it's basically a spray and pray weapon which can perform quite well, as the recoil created from the gun's fire can be managed fairly easily to a certain degree. Though stray anywhere beyond those closer proximities, and it's going to be a far less reliable gun to use, with that kick becoming too much to handle. Because both variants have bipods fitted to them, this massively increases their usability over longer distances, at the expense of having to stand or lie down whilst remaining still. And despite the MG14 seeming like an incredibly deadly, threatening weapon designed for assault in the enemy, it's usually best played with a more passive-aggressive mindset, planting down with the bipod to gain that accuracy benefit, whilst gunning down targets from stationary positions. Because the Parabellum has such a high muzzle velocity, this is going to make it easier to use over mid to long ranges, with bullets whizzing through the air at such a rapid rate, going where you need them to go in a shorter amount of time. This means that it can be an ideal anti-sniper gun, and it can also be used to suppress and kill enemies far away, taking over objectives. Though even with the bipod deployed, you'll still have to try and control the gun's violent kick, which can prove to be a bit awkward at times. The Parabellum MG14's large ammo capacity goes hand in hand with the weapon's speed, and having up to 100 rounds is usually going to provide you with enough firepower to take down anyone unlucky enough to be in your sights. You'll be able to keep that stream of bullets flowing a lot faster for longer, making you a very deadly opponent towards elite class players, cavalry on horseback, and even planes buzzing around in the sky, though you will have to contend with the gun's painfully long reloads in between. If you want a fast firing gun that can cut down squads of enemies over all ranges, with the trade-off of being highly inaccurate without the aid of its bipod, then the Parabellum MG14 might be the gun for you. It's the true definition of a killing machine, which power can sometimes, unfortunately, get the better of it. So that's it for another one, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video. Give me a like if you did, and subscribe for loads more content. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in our next episode.